The scorching summer sun beat down on Olivia Lawrence as she stood at the threshold of her barren ranch, watching dust devils dance across the parched earth like the ghosts of dreams long dead. Her calloused hands, once soft and delicate when she'd arrived in Promise Creek, Wyoming territory, clutched the eviction notice so tightly that the paper crumpled in her grip. The year was 1876, and everything she had built with Thomas over the past 3 years was crumbling like the dry soil beneath her feet. "You have until the end of the month, Mrs. Lawrence," the bank manager had said with rehearsed sympathy earlier that morning. "I'm sorry, but without Mr. Lawrence's income, there's simply no way forward. No way forward." The phrase echoed in Olivia's mind as she walked the perimeter of the small ranch house. No way forward because Thomas had left her 6 months ago, unable to bear the weight of their childless marriage any longer. "A man needs sons," he had told her on that cold January night as he packed his belongings. "I can't waste any more years hoping for what God clearly doesn't intend to give us." She had stood in stunned silence as he loaded his wagon, her 26-year-old heart shattering with each item he carried out. 3 years of marriage, 3 years of trying, 3 years of monthly disappointments all ended with his back to her as he drove away toward a new life in California. The sound of approaching hoofbeats pulled Olivia from her bitter memories. She shielded her eyes against the sun and saw a lone rider approaching, the silhouette unfamiliar against the vast Wyoming sky. Instinctively, she reached for the shotgun she kept by the door, resting it in the crook of her arm, not raised, but present. In the wild expanse of the frontier, a woman alone couldn't be too careful. The rider slowed as he approached, raising a hand in greeting. He was tall in the saddle, with broad shoulders and a battered hat pulled low over his face. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but even at a distance, there was something in his posture that spoke of capability. "Good afternoon, madam," he called, stopping a respectful distance away. "Name's Xavier Morgan. I heard in town you might be looking for ranch help." Olivia's laugh was sharp and humorless. "You heard wrong, Mr. Morgan. This ranch won't be mine much longer." He dismounted with fluid grace that belied his size, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. As he stepped closer, she could see his face clearly weathered by sun and wind, with keen blue eyes that assessed her situation in a single glance. He wasn't handsome in the conventional way Thomas had been, but there was strength in the lines of his face and something honest in his direct gaze that made her lower the shotgun slightly. "I also heard about your situation, Mrs. Lawrence," he said, his voice low and respectful. "That your husband left. Did the gossips in town also tell you why?" Her voice was brittle with pride. Xavier removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with sunlight. "They did," he admitted, unashamed of the truth, "and I'm sorry for it, but that's not why I'm here." "Then why are you here, Mr. Morgan? Because unless you're bringing me a miracle, there's nothing to be done." "I might be bringing something better than a miracle, madam. Hard work." He gestured to the ranch around them. "This is good land, despite the drought. I've worked cattle all my life, and I know how to make places like this turn a profit." Olivia's eyes narrowed. "And what would you want in return? Because I have nothing to give, room and board for now," he said simply. "And if we turn things around, a fair percentage of what we make." "I'm not looking to take advantage, Mrs. Lawrence. Just looking for a place to put down roots after too many years of drifting." She studied him closely, searching for deception. Finding none, she asked the question that had been burning in her since he mentioned town gossip. "And you don't care that I can't have children, that I'm—" She couldn't bring herself to say the word Thomas had hurled at her like a stone. "Barren." Xavier's expression remained unchanged, but something flickered in his eyes, not pity, but a quiet understanding that touched something wounded in Olivia's heart. "Madam, I've known men who abandoned their posts when the shooting started, who left partners to die in blizzards, who betrayed every code of the frontier for their own gain." He placed his hat back on his head. "A man who leaves because life dealt a hard hand isn't much of a man at all, in my estimation." The wind picked up, sending dust swirling around them as they stood in silent assessment of each other. In the distance, a hawk cried out, its voice carrying across the empty plains. "You're proposing a business arrangement," Olivia finally said. "Nothing more." "Yes, madam, a partnership to save this land, and if we fail," Xavier shrugged, "then we fail trying, better than not trying at all." Olivia thought of the emptiness of the past 6 months, of waking each morning wondering if this was all her life would ever be. She thought of returning to her parents in Boston, admitting defeat. She thought of Thomas finding some fertile young woman to give him the sons he craved. "I can give you until the end of the month," she said finally. "That's when the bank takes everything if I can't make the payment." Xavier nodded once decisively. "Then we'd better get started." That evening, as Olivia prepared a simple meal of beans and cornbread, she watched Xavier through the window as he assessed the barn and corrals. He moved with purpose, making mental notes, occasionally writing in a small book he carried. There was something reassuring about his methodical approach, so different from Thomas's grand dreams and schemes that had rarely materialized. She had given him the small room at the back of the house, formerly used for storage. He had accepted it with gratitude, asking only for water to wash away the trail dust before dinner. Now, as they sat across from each other at her kitchen table, the lamplight casting shadows on the walls, Olivia realized this was the first time she'd shared a meal with anyone since Thomas left. "Tomorrow I'll ride into town," Xavier said between careful bites. "Need to see what prices cattle are fetching, what the market's looking for." "We have 20 head left," Olivia said. "Thomas sold most of our stock before." She trailed off. Xavier nodded, understanding the unspoken. "20's enough to start rebuilding. The drought's been hard on everyone, might be able to buy from distressed sellers at good prices." "With what money?" Olivia asked. Xavier's smile was slight but genuine. "I've been working cattle drives for 15 years, Mrs. Lawrence. I may be a drifter, but I'm not a poor one. Call me Olivia," she said suddenly, surprising herself. "If we're to be partners, even temporarily, Mrs. Lawrence feels too formal." "Olivia," he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. "Then I'm Xavier to you." That night, lying in bed, Olivia listened to the unfamiliar sounds of another person moving through her house. There was comfort in it, she realized, not because she was afraid to be alone, but because loneliness itself had become her most constant companion. Outside, a coyote called to the moon, its voice haunting and beautiful in the vastness of the Wyoming night. Olivia closed her eyes and allowed herself, for the first time in months, to feel the faintest glimmer of hope. The next morning dawned clear and promising. Olivia rose early, as was her habit, only to find Xavier already outside, repairing a section of fence that had collapsed during the last windstorm. Thomas had promised to fix it for months before he left. Xavier had simply seen what needed doing and done it. She brought him coffee, watching as he worked with efficient movements. "You didn't have to start so early," she said. Xavier accepted the cup with a nod of thanks. "Sun's up, work's waiting, that's always been my way." "What did you learn?" she asked. "Before coming here, I mean." Xavier leaned against the newly repaired fence post. "I was born in Texas, raised on my father's ranch until raiders took it in him when I was 14. Worked as a ranch hand, then a drover. Fought for the Confederacy because that's what Texas boys did, though I had no love for the cause. After the war, I drifted where the work took me." He took a sip of coffee. "Seen most of the territories, worked every kind of outfit there is, and never settled anywhere." Something shadowed his eyes. "Never found a reason compelling enough to stay." "What about family, a wife?" "Never married," he said simply. "Nearly did once, but she chose a banker instead, probably for the best. Banking hours are more predictable than a cowboy's." The frank admission made Olivia smile despite herself. "And that's why you think you can save my ranch, because you've seen so many others." "I think I can help you save your ranch," he corrected. "Because I've seen what works and what doesn't, and because you strike me as someone who doesn't give up easily." His assessment warmed something in Olivia that had been cold for too long. "I should get breakfast started," she said, turning back toward the house. "And then I want to show you the rest of the property. There are water rights issues you should know about." Xavier nodded. "I'll finish up here and join you." Over the next 2 weeks, Xavier proved himself to be everything he'd claimed and more. He worked from dawn until dusk, repairing fences, assessing the remaining cattle, and making improvements to the irrigation system that Thomas had neglected. With money from his own savings, he purchased 10 additional head of cattle at prices that impressed even Olivia, who had grown up watching her merchant father negotiate. More surprising to Olivia was how easily they fell into a rhythm together. Xavier respected her knowledge of the ranch and sought her input on decisions, but he didn't hesitate to share his expertise. They disagreed. Sometimes Olivia preferred caution, while Xavier was willing to take calculated risks, but their arguments were reasoned rather than heated. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors while discussing the next day's work. Sometimes they talked about their pasts, Olivia's privileged Boston upbringing and her scandalous choice to marry a frontiersman, Xavier's harder road through war and wandering. Other times, they simply sat in comfortable silence, two souls finding unexpected peace in each other's company. It was during one such evening, with only a week remaining before the bank's deadline, that Olivia finally asked the question that had been on her mind since Xavier arrived. "Why did you really come here?" she asked, her voice quiet in the gathering dusk. "The truth, Xavier." He was silent for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was contemplative. "I've spent my life helping other men build their dreams," he said. "Pushing their cattle, working their land, fighting their wars. 15 years of it. In Lander, I overheard talk about your ranch, about a woman trying to hold on to something that mattered to her, even after everyone said she should give up." He looked at her then, his gaze steady. "I admired that, thought maybe it was time I helped build something that mattered to me too." "And if we lose the ranch, then at least we fought for it," he said simply. "That counts for something in my book." 4 days later, disaster struck. Xavier had ridden to a neighboring ranch to negotiate water access rights, and Olivia was checking the vegetable garden when she heard the unmistakable sound of gunshots in the distance. Her blood ran cold as she recognized the direction toward the north pasture where their best breeding stock grazed. Grabbing her shotgun, Olivia mounted her mare and rode hard toward the sound. As she crested the hill, her worst fears were confirmed. 3 men on horseback were driving the cattle toward the property line, firing shots to keep them moving. Rustlers. Without hesitation, Olivia raised her shotgun and fired a warning shot into the air. The men turned, clearly surprised to see a woman confronting them. One raised his pistol, but another, apparently the leader, held up his hand. "Well, well," he called out, his voice carrying across the distance between them. "If it ain't Mrs. Lawrence herself. Heard your husband left you high and dry." "And I heard Jeb Carter was hanging rustlers over in Sweetwater," Olivia replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Should I send word you're in the area?" The leader spat on the ground. "You got nerve, I'll give you that. But you're outnumbered and that new hand of yours is too far to help. Why don't you just ride on back to your house and pretend you didn't see nothing?" "These are my cattle," Olivia said, cocking the shotgun, "and this is my land." "Not for long from what I hear," the man sneered. "Bank's taking it all next week. We're just expediting the inventory reduction." Olivia aimed the shotgun directly at him. "I won't miss at this distance." Something in her voice must have conveyed her determination, because the leader's smile faltered. He studied her for a long moment, calculating the risk. "3 of us, one of you," he said finally. "Those ain't good odds, madam. Makes it simpler for me," came Xavier's voice from behind the rustlers. "I only need to watch 3 directions." The rustlers whirled to find Xavier sitting calmly on his horse, rifle balanced across his saddle, having circled back from his errand at the sound of gunfire. "This ain't worth dying over," the leader said to his companions after a tense standoff. Slowly, they backed their horses away, leaving the cattle behind. "This ain't over, Lawrence," he called as they retreated. Once they were gone, Olivia's hands began to shake so badly she nearly dropped the shotgun. Xavier rode to her side, gently taking the weapon. "You stood your ground," he said, admiration clear in his voice. "Most men wouldn't have had the courage." "I was terrified," she admitted. "Courage isn't about not being afraid," Xavier said. "It's about what you do despite the fear." He looked out at the scattered cattle. "Let's get them back to the home pasture. I think we need to move our timetable up." That night, Xavier laid out a new plan. "Those rustlers will be back, maybe with more men. We need to get the bank payment together now, not wait until the deadline." "How?" "We were counting on selling cattle at the end of the month. There's a cattle buyer in Lander looking for stock to send east. If we drive our cattle there tomorrow, we might get enough to make the payment." "That's a 2-day drive," Olivia said, "and we're just 2 people." Xavier's expression was grim. "Then we'd better leave at first light." They worked through the night, preparing supplies and selecting which cattle to take. By dawn, they had 30 head ready to move, including all 20 of Olivia's original stock and the 10 Xavier had purchased. The drive was grueling. Summer heat beat down on them as they pushed the cattle across the rugged terrain. Olivia rode drag position, eating dust and keeping stragglers moving, while Xavier rode point, setting the pace and direction. They spoke little, saving their energy for the work at hand. By nightfall of the first day, they had covered less ground than hoped. As they made camp, Olivia's muscles screamed from hours in the saddle. She moved stiffly, trying not to show how exhausted she was as she helped prepare a meager supper. "You should rest," Xavier said, taking the coffee pot from her hands. "I'll take first watch." "I can pull my weight," Olivia insisted. Xavier's expression softened. "I know you can, that's not in question, but one of us needs to be alert tomorrow, and I've done this more times than I can count." Too tired to argue, Olivia wrapped herself in a blanket near the small fire. The last thing she remembered before drifting off was Xavier's silhouette against the star-filled sky, a sentinel keeping watch over her and the cattle that represented their last chance. She woke to his hand on her shoulder and the pale light of pre-dawn. "We need to move," he said urgently. "I spotted riders on our back trail." Fear jolted through Olivia as she scrambled to her feet. "The rustlers?" Xavier nodded grimly. 3 riders moving fast, could be the same ones. They broke camp in minutes, pushing the cattle into motion before the sun had fully crested the horizon. Xavier set a harder pace, driving the herd toward Lander with renewed urgency. Olivia kept glancing behind them, watching for dust clouds that would signal pursuit. By midday, the heat was oppressive and the cattle were showing signs of fatigue. One young steer collapsed, unable to continue. Xavier dismounted to check on the animal. "Heat exhaustion," he said, looking up at Olivia. "We can't wait for him to recover." The decision weighed heavily, but they both knew what had to be done. Xavier put the suffering animal out of its misery with a clean shot, and they pushed on. The loss of even one had a blow to their already precarious situation. Late in the afternoon, disaster struck again. As they crossed a shallow stream, one of the cows spooked at something in the water and bolted, causing a chain reaction in the herd. Suddenly, cattle were scattering in all directions, bellowing in panic. "Cut them off," Xavier shouted, spurring his horse toward the main group. Olivia raced to prevent several cows from breaking away completely, her horse splashing through the stream as she circled the frightened animals. For what felt like hours, they worked frantically to regain control, whistling and calling until their voices grew hoarse. When they finally had the herd together again, the sun was setting and they had lost valuable time. Worse, in the chaos, they had lost 3 more head that had run too far to recover. "We keep moving," Xavier decided, his face grim in the fading light. "We can't risk stopping again." Through the night they pressed on, taking turns dozing in the saddle while the other kept the cattle moving. The moon provided enough light to navigate, and the cooler temperatures were easier on the animals. By dawn, they could see Lander in the distance, a collection of wooden buildings nestled in the valley ahead. "We made it," Olivia whispered, scarcely believing it. Xavier's relief was palpable, but his vigilance never wavered. "Let's get them to the stockyards before we celebrate." The cattle buyer, a portly man named Peterson, was surprised to see them drive the herd into town so early in the morning. He eyed the cattle critically, noting their trail-weary condition. "Not the prime stock I was hoping for," he commented, making a show of inspecting several animals. "They're healthy breeding stock that survived the drought," Xavier countered. "Worth every penny of the going rate." Peterson shook his head. "Can't give you top dollar, not with them looking this rough. $15 a head is my offer." Olivia's heart sank. At that price, they would fall short of the bank payment, even counting Xavier's personal funds. "20, Xavier said firmly. "These are quality animals that will fetch twice that back east," Peterson laughed. 17, and that's being generous." The negotiation continued, with Xavier holding firm while Peterson gradually raised his offer. Finally, they settled on $18 per head, still less than needed, but the best they could do. As Peterson counted out the money, Olivia calculated quickly. Even with Xavier's savings added, they were still $30 short of the bank payment, so close yet still facing failure. "Thank you for your help," she said quietly to Xavier as they led their horses toward the hotel. "I know we didn't quite make it, but you kept your word. You tried." Xavier was silent, his expression thoughtful as they secured rooms for the night. Before retiring, he said simply, "Don't give up just yet, Olivia. Morning might bring new possibilities." Exhausted beyond measure, Olivia fell into a dreamless sleep in her small hotel room. When she woke, late morning sunlight was streaming through the curtains, and for a moment she was disoriented. Then reality came crashing back. They had failed, despite everything. The ranch would be lost. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Xavier. The hotel clerk informed her that Mr. Morgan had left at dawn and hadn't returned. Concern gnawed at her as the morning stretched into afternoon with no sign of him. Had he abandoned her too, now that their effort had failed? Just as the thought formed, the hotel door swung open and Xavier walked in, looking weary but oddly satisfied. He crossed to where Olivia sat and placed a small pouch on the table between them. "What's this?" she asked. "The rest of what we need," he said. $32 to be exact. Olivia stared at him in disbelief. "How? Sold my saddle and pocket watch," he said simply. "Good saddle, good watch, got a fair price." "Xavier," Olivia breathed, stunned by the sacrifice. "Those were your personal belongings. You need your saddle," he shrugged. "I can buy another saddle." Can't buy another chance to save what matters. In that moment, looking at this man who had given everything to help save her ranch a ranch, he had no real claim to something shifted in Olivia's heart. This wasn't just about business anymore, hadn't been for some time perhaps. "Why would you do that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Xavier met her gaze steadily. "Because I've wandered enough to know when I've found a place worth staying for." They rode back to Promise Creek the next day, having wired the bank payment ahead. Xavier rode a borrowed horse with a basic saddle the livery stable had practically given him after hearing their story. Olivia couldn't stop glancing at him as they traveled, seeing him with new eyes. As the ranch came into view on the horizon, Olivia felt a swell of emotion she hadn't expected. This land that had seen her highest hopes and deepest sorrows now represented something new, a second chance, not just for the ranch, but perhaps for her heart as well. "Home," Xavier said simply, looking out at the weathered buildings and surrounding pastures. "Yes," Olivia agreed. "Home." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, the comfortable silence between them felt different, charged with unspoken feelings and possibilities. Olivia found herself thinking of the future for the first time since Thomas had left. Not just surviving, but building something, growing something with Xavier at her side. "I never properly thanked you," she said finally. "Not just for saving the ranch, but for believing it could be saved when even I had doubts." Xavier turned to look at her, his expression open and unguarded. "You don't need to thank me. Being here, working this land with you, it's what I want, Olivia." "Is it enough?" she asked, the question that had haunted her finally finding voice. "A ranch partnership with a woman who can't give you children, who's been called barren." Xavier's face hardened at the word, and for a moment Olivia feared she had said too much. Then he reached across the space between them and took her hand. "Let me tell you something, Olivia Lawrence," he said, his voice low and intense. "I've known men who fathered a dozen children and never really saw a single one of them. Men who treated their sons like property and their daughters like burdens. Having children doesn't make a man whole any more than not having them makes a woman broken." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. "Thomas couldn't see it that way." "Then Thomas was a fool who didn't deserve you," Xavier said simply. "When I look at you, I don't see what's missing. I see everything that's there: your strength, your determination, your heart." Olivia's breath caught in her throat as he continued. "He left you for being barren," Xavier said, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand. "But I'll stay for being true, true to this land, true to yourself, and if you'll have me, true to us." The confession hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Olivia looked into his eyes and saw not pity or compromise but genuine feeling, a man offering his heart without reservation or condition. "Xavier," she whispered, "are you certain? There will never be children of our own." "There are children in this world who need homes," he said. "If we decide that's what we want someday. But what I know I want is you, Olivia. You and this land and the life we could build together." Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle and questioning at first, then deepening as Olivia responded, her hand coming up to touch his face. When they finally parted, the stars had emerged in the darkening sky. "I think I've been waiting for you," she said softly, without even knowing it. "I know I've been searching for you," he replied. "In every territory, on every trail, I just didn't know what I was looking for until I found you." 2 weeks later, they stood before the minister in Promise Creek's small church. The ceremony was simple, attended by the few neighbors who had supported Olivia through her difficulties, and several townspeople who had been impressed by Xavier's determination to save the ranch. As they exchanged vows, Olivia wore her mother's lace shawl over a new blue dress. Xavier had purchased a proper suit for the occasion, looking both handsome and slightly uncomfortable in the formal attire. But his eyes never left Olivia's face, and his voice never wavered as he promised to love and cherish her for all of his days. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." As Xavier's lips met hers, sealing their union, Olivia felt the last of the shadows Thomas had left behind finally fade away. This was no desperate attempt to save her ranch or escape loneliness. This was a choice made with clear eyes and full hearts, two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. The following year brought both challenges and triumphs. A harsh winter tested their resilience, but they faced it together, working side by side to keep the cattle fed and the ranch functioning. Spring arrived with renewed promise, bringing lush growth to pastures that had suffered through years of drought. Under Xavier's careful management and Olivia's meticulous record-keeping, the ranch began to prosper. They expanded their herd gradually, focusing on quality breeding stock that commanded premium prices. By their first anniversary, they had repaid Xavier's investment and were discussing plans to purchase the adjacent property that had gone into foreclosure. On a warm evening in late summer, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, a ritual that had become sacred to them, both Olivia shared news that had been confirmed by the doctor that day. "There's a family passing through town," she said carefully. "A widow with a newborn she can't care for. She's looking for a home for the child." Xavier turned to look at her, reading the question in her eyes. "You've spoken with her," Olivia nodded. "The baby is a girl, healthy but unwanted." The mother is continuing west to Oregon where she has family waiting. And you want to take her in, Xavier said, not a question but a statement of understanding. Only if you feel it's right, Olivia said. This would be our decision, not just mine. Xavier was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful as he gazed out at the land they had saved together. Finally, he turned to her, taking both her hands in his. I told you once there are children in this world who need homes, he said. If this little girl needs a home and we have one to offer, then I think the answer is clear. The joy that bloomed in Olivia's face was answer enough. Xavier pulled her close, kissing her forehead gently. Besides, he said with a smile, every ranch needs an heir, someone to carry on what we're building. 2 days later, they brought home the infant girl, naming her Hope Morgan. She had a shock of dark hair and bright, curious eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. The moment Xavier held her in his arms, his expression of wonder and immediate love told Olivia all she needed to know this was right. This was meant to be. As autumn painted the surrounding hills in gold and crimson, life settled into a new rhythm. Olivia discovered depths of maternal feeling she had never expected to experience, while Xavier proved to be a natural father, gentle and attentive. Together, they cared for Hope and the ranch with equal devotion, their partnership deepening with each passing day. One evening, as Xavier rocked Hope to sleep while Olivia mended by the fire, a knock came at their door. Unusual for such a remote location, the sound put them both on alert. Xavier carefully transferred the sleeping baby to Olivia and reached for the rifle kept near the door. "Who's there?" he called. "Thomas Lawrence," came the reply. "I've come to see my wife." Olivia froze, her arms tightening protectively around Hope. Xavier glanced back at her, his expression a silent question. At her slight nod, he opened the door, keeping his body positioned between the visitor and his family. Thomas stood on the porch, looking much as he had the day he left, though perhaps a bit thinner, a bit more weather-beaten. His eyes widened at the sight of Xavier, clearly not expecting another man in what he still thought of as his home. "Who are you?" Thomas demanded. "Xavier Morgan," came the steady reply. "Olivia's husband." Thomas's shock was evident as his gaze moved past Xavier to where Olivia stood, Hope cradled in her arms. "You were married?" he asked incredulously. "And a baby?" "Yes to both," Olivia said, her voice stronger than she had expected it to be. "What are you doing here, Thomas?" Thomas removed his hat, turning it nervously in his hands. "Things didn't work out in California," he admitted. "I heard the ranch was doing well again and I thought we might try again." "You thought wrong," Xavier said quietly, no anger in his voice, just absolute certainty. "Olivia," Thomas appealed directly to her, ignoring Xavier. "We had 3 years together. Doesn't that count for something? I made a mistake, I see that now." Olivia looked at the man she had once loved, the man whose rejection had nearly destroyed her. She felt nothing but a distant pity. "You left me for being barren," she said, echoing the words that had once cut her to the core. Xavier stayed for being true. Thomas flinched at the direct reference to his abandonment. "I was wrong," he said. "I can see that now." "You have a child, our daughter is adopted," Xavier interrupted, his voice level. "And she is ours in every way that matters." Understanding dawned in Thomas's eyes as he looked between them. "You still can't have children," he said to Olivia. "No," she agreed calmly. "I can't bear children." "But I am a mother, Thomas, and Xavier is a father, and we have built something here that you can have no part of." The finality in her tone left no room for argument. Thomas stood for a moment longer, seeming to search for words that might sway her. Finding none, he finally nodded and replaced his hat. "I'm sorry, Olivia," he said quietly, "for what it's worth." "I know," she replied. "Safe travels, Thomas." After he had gone, Xavier closed the door and returned to Olivia's side. She was trembling slightly, the confrontation having taken more from her than she had expected. Wordlessly, Xavier wrapped his arms around both her and Hope, holding them close. "You were right to send him away," Xavier murmured against her hair. "There was never any question," Olivia replied, leaning into his strength. My life is here now, with you, with Hope. That night, after Hope was settled in her cradle, Xavier and Olivia stood at the bedroom window, looking out at the star-filled sky. The ranch spread out before them, peaceful in the moonlight, the land they had saved together, the home they were building. When Thomas showed up, Xavier said carefully, "Did you feel anything?" "Regret, maybe." Olivia turned to face him, reaching up to touch his face. "The only thing I felt was gratitude," she said. "Gratitude that he left because it brought you to me." Xavier caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "When I first came here," he said, "I told you I was looking for a place to put down roots. And have you found it?" Olivia asked, though she already knew the answer. "I found more than that," he said, drawing her close. "I found a family, I found a home, I found you." Outside their window, a shooting star blazed across the Wyoming sky, brief, brilliant, and beautiful. Like life itself, Olivia thought. Unpredictable and sometimes painful, but capable of such unexpected joy when you were brave enough to keep your heart open. "I love you, Xavier Morgan," she whispered. "And I love you, Olivia Morgan," he replied, the name still new and wonderful on his tongue. "For all my days." As years passed, the Morgan ranch prospered. Hope grew into a spirited young girl with her mother's determination and her father's quiet strength. When she was 5, they adopted twin boys whose parents had died in a riverboat accident, expanding their family in ways Olivia had once believed impossible. Xavier often remarked that their family was like their ranch, built not just on blood or birth, but on choice and commitment, on staying true when staying was hardest. The barrenness that had once defined Olivia's life had given way to abundance of love, of purpose, of family. And sometimes, on summer evenings when the children were asleep and the day's work was done, Olivia and Xavier would sit on their porch, hands intertwined, watching the stars emerge over the land they both loved. In those moments of perfect peace, Olivia would remember the broken woman she had been when Xavier first rode onto her ranch and marvel at the journey that had brought them here. "No regrets?" Xavier would sometimes ask, a ritual between them. "No regrets," Olivia would always answer. And it was true, for the barren woman had found fertility of a different kind in the ranch that flourished under their care, in the children who filled their home with laughter, and in the love of a man who had seen her true worth when she needed it most. In the vast expanse of the Wyoming territory, where so many sought their fortunes and found only hardship, Olivia and Xavier Morgan had discovered the rarest treasure of all, a love built on respect, strengthened by adversity, and made perfect in its acceptance of imperfection. A love that would endure, like the land itself, through all the seasons of their lives.